You have quietly accepted a secondary role in your own life. There is a silent logic operating in the background of your mind, dictating what you attempt and what you avoid. It is a mental framework that divides the world into two distinct groups, those who build the future and those who merely watch it unfold. You see others achieving, creating, and breaking barriers, and a quiet voice whispers that they possess something you lack. This is not the truth, it is an emotional surrender. We are going to explore the profound difference between the spectator who delegates their greatness and the pioneer who claims it. You will see how a simple shift in internal phrasing can dismantle the invisible walls keeping you stuck. This is not about motivation, it is about recognizing the subtle ways you have been robbing yourself of your own potential. There is a paralyzing phrase that many adopt without realizing its destructive power. If someone else can do it, let them do it. This thought masquerades as humility or efficiency, but it is actually the ultimate externalization of responsibility. It is the defining anthem of the spectator. By believing that the world already has enough creators, you give yourself permission to remain entirely passive. Every time you defer an opportunity because someone else is already doing it, you slowly erode your own identity. You trade your unique potential for the fleeting comfort of avoiding the arena, weakening your internal drive day by day. You become a permanent consumer, watching the mountains being climbed on a screen, sitting in a dim room, feeling a vague, persistent sense of emptiness. To break this, you must reframe how you view the achievements of others. Their success is not a signal for you to stand down. It is a profound reflection of shared human potential. If another person bound by the same fundamental limitations can accomplish a difficult task, it means the core capability exists within you as well. Their path is proof of concept, and once you understand this, you begin to see something deeper. The mindset of the spectator relies heavily on delegating greatness. It assumes that innovation, leadership, and resilience are traits reserved for a predetermined few. When you operate under this assumption, you naturally shrink away from challenges. You convince yourself that the heavy lifting of progress is not your burden to bear, conveniently avoiding the friction required for personal growth. This delegation creates a deep, hidden emotional cost. Over time, the constant avoidance of demanding effort breeds a quiet resentment towards yourself and the world. You start to rationalize your stagnation. You tell yourself that you are simply being realistic or practical, when in truth, you are letting your unique capabilities wither away from disuse. The real tragedy is not a lack of talent, but a lack of applied will. You must recognize that greatness cannot be outsourced. Taking ownership means understanding that the world does not owe you fulfillment or progress. If you want a life of substance, you have to be the one to forge it. Stop viewing the success of others as an excuse to rest, and start viewing it as a standard to meet. But this is only the surface. The next thing you must understand is quieter, but more dangerous. We are naturally drawn to the path of least resistance. The spectator logic is incredibly seductive because it is deeply, dangerously comfortable. It requires zero risk, zero failure, and zero public scrutiny. You can sit safely on the sidelines, analyzing and criticizing those who are actually sweating in the arena without ever putting your own ego on the line. It feels like safety, but it is a trap. However, absolutely nothing of value grows inside that zone of comfort. What feels like safety is actually a slow, invisible decay. The human mind requires friction and challenge to remain sharp and vital. When you consistently choose the armchair over the mountain, your spirit atrophies. You become insulated from failure, but you also become entirely insulated from the profound joy of genuine achievement. The antidote to this decay is the deliberate, conscious choice of discomfort. You must willingly step into environments where you might fail, where the outcome is not guaranteed, and where intense effort is mandatory. Embracing this friction is exactly how you rebuild your internal strength and reclaim your autonomy. You must actively seek the heavy weight of responsibility. This is where the real change begins. There is a second, more insidious phrase that paralyzes human potential. If no one has done it, why should I? On the surface, this sounds like pure, calculating logic. It sounds like a prudent assessment of probability and risk, but beneath that rational, carefully constructed facade, it is simply the voice of fear. It is a mindset of scarcity that equates the absence of a precedent with absolute impossibility. When you let this fear dictate your actions, you surrender before the battle even begins. You create a self-fulfilling prophecy of mediocrity. By assuming that uncharted territory is inherently impassable, you guarantee that you will never discover what lies beyond the known borders. You remain trapped in the same repetitive cycles, paralyzed by the fear of looking foolish or wasting your effort. You must learn to strip away the disguise of this false prudence, acknowledge the deep-seated fear, but completely refuse to let it make your decisions. Understand that every monumental leap in human history was achieved by someone who looked at what had never been done and decided to do it anyway. The unknown is not a warning sign, it is a blank canvas waiting for your mark, and slowly something inside you starts to return. The spectator is always waiting, waiting for the perfect conditions, waiting for absolute certainty, or waiting for someone else to pave the way and make it easy. This endless waiting is a symptom of a fractured relationship with time. You operate as if time is infinite, convincing yourself that you will eventually step up when the circumstances are perfectly aligned, but that day never arrives. The silent, devastating cost of this waiting is the unrecoverable loss of your life's finite, precious hours. While you wait for someone else to do the heavy lifting, your energy fades and your window of opportunity steadily narrows. The world moves forward with ruthless speed, leaving you behind with nothing but a collection of untested theories and quiet, heavy regrets about what you could have built if you had only dared to start. The pioneer understands that there is no perfect moment and no savior coming to do the work. You must adopt the belief that if no one can do it, I must be the first. You are the path. You are the one you have been waiting for. Stop looking outward for permission and start looking inward for resolve. The time to build your foundation is right now, and this realization leads us to a necessary shift. And once you understand this, you begin to see something deeper. The shift from spectator to pioneer requires a fundamental rewiring of how you perceive the world. It starts with a quiet reflection on your own limitations. You have been told that your limits are fixed, that your current state is permanent. This is the comfort of a weak pattern, a lie you accepted to avoid the heavy lifting of change. But deep down, you feel the friction of a life that is too small for you. The consequence of this accepted limitation is a slow, agonizing drain of your vital energy. You waste your days managing the symptoms of your own stagnation. You overstimulate your mind with endless noise, scrolling through the achievements of others, trying to numb the quiet ache of your own inactivity. You are emotionally exhausted not because you're doing too much, but because you're doing absolutely nothing of true value. The pioneer looks at this pain and uses it as a compass. You must stop trying to escape the discomfort of your unfulfilled potential and instead turn directly toward it. You must demand more from your own reflection. When you look in the mirror, stop seeing a victim of circumstance and start seeing the architect of your own rescue. This is not about motivation, this is about basic self-respect. The next thing you must understand is quieter, but more dangerous. It is the deeply ingrained myth of the chosen few. Society sells you the illusion that those who break barriers and forge new paths were simply born with a rare, unattainable spark. You use this myth as a shield. It is a convenient narrative that protects your ego from the harsh reality of your own lack of discipline. Believing in this myth is a daily act of self-betrayal. It causes you to emotionally depend on the validation of the very system that keeps you small. You wait to be chosen, to be discovered, or to be given permission to start. In doing so, you surrender your agency. You become a passive character in your own story, watching the years slip by while you hold on to the false hope that someday, somehow, your turn will effortlessly arrive. The truth you must accept is that no one is coming to choose you. You must choose yourself. The path of the pioneer is built on the profound realization that greatness is not an inheritance. It is a brutal, daily decision. You have to discard the myth and embrace the cold, empowering reality that your life is entirely in your own hands. And slowly, something inside you starts to return. When that realization settles, your vision fundamentally changes. You begin seeing success not as a threat, but as a map. Previously, witnessing the achievements of others triggered a quiet, toxic envy. It was a painful reminder of what you were not doing. This envy is a parasite. It consumes the emotional energy you desperately need to build your own foundation. This emotional dependence on comparing yourself to others is a massive leak in your internal reservoir. It keeps you perpetually distracted. Instead of focusing on the hard, unglamorous work required to master your own craft, you become obsessed with the highlights of someone else's journey. You lose your direction, wandering aimlessly in a maze of constant comparison and resulting self-doubt. You must ruthlessly cut off this source of mental drain. When you see someone doing what you thought was impossible, do not let it shrink you. Let it expand your concept of reality. Analyze their path, respect their effort, and extract the lessons. Their victory is simply physical proof that the mechanics of success exist. You just have to apply them to your own life. This is where the real change begins. The painful truth is simple. The heaviest burden a man can carry is the weight of his unused potential. It is a silent, suffocating pressure that builds up over years of avoidance. You know exactly what you are capable of, yet you consistently choose the path of least resistance. This dissonance between who you are and who you could be is the root cause of your quiet suffering. This unused potential does not simply disappear. It turns toxic. It manifests as a low-grade anxiety, a constant irritability, and a deep-seated feeling of being an imposter in your own life. You try to drown this feeling with cheap dopamine and endless distractions, but the silence always brings it back. You are betraying your own future, and your mind knows it, punishing you with a lack of true peace. To release this weight, you must stop hoarding your capabilities. You have to start spending your potential on difficult tasks. It is better to fail completely while attempting something massive than to succeed flawlessly at doing nothing at all. You must exhaust yourself in the pursuit of something meaningful. The exhaustion of a pioneer is a deeply fulfilling rest. But peace does not come from escaping life. It comes from facing it differently. The final illusion you must shatter is the habit of avoidance itself. You keep calling it caution, but it is really emotional surrender. You have trained your mind to instantly seek the exit whenever you encounter friction. Avoidance has become your default mechanism, a deeply carved groove in your psychology that dictates every decision you make. Every time you back down from a necessary challenge, you reinforce this habit. You signal to your subconscious that you are weak, that you cannot handle the demands of reality. This creates a terrifying downward spiral of shrinking confidence. The more you avoid, the smaller your world becomes, until you're trapped in a tiny, suffocating box of your own making, terrified of the world outside. Breaking this habit requires a violent psychological pivot. You must start deliberately walking into the very situations you have been avoiding. You do not need more motivation, you need less noise and more decisive action. Start with the smallest, most immediate point of friction and crush it. This is not about grand gestures, this is about taking back control of your own mind, one uncomfortable decision at a time. The next thing you must understand is quieter, but more dangerous. When you finally decide to act, you will step into an empty space. There is no blueprint for your specific life. This uncharted territory terrifies the spectator because it lacks guarantees. They prefer the crowded, noisy rooms of mediocrity because there is safety in numbers. But the pioneer understands that the quiet isolation of the unknown is where your true identity is forged. The cost of avoiding this silence is severe. If you constantly surround yourself with the opinions and directions of others, you drown out your own internal compass. You become a collection of borrowed beliefs, completely dependent on external validation. You lose the ability to sit alone with your thoughts, terrified of the emptiness you might find. This lack of boundaries makes you emotionally fragile, easily swayed by the slightest resistance. You must build a fortress of silence. Discipline begins here, in the quiet refusal to let the world dictate your next move. Establishing boundaries is not about shutting people out. It is about protecting the fragile beginnings of your new identity. You have to be willing to walk alone for a while. You must embrace the isolation as a necessary phase of rebuilding. This is not discipline. This is self-respect, and this leads to a new kind of bravery. The courage to be first is rarely loud or cinematic. It is the quiet, solitary decision to move forward without looking back to see who is following. The spectator always waits for consensus. They need a committee to approve their ambitions. But true leadership of self requires you to become the authority of your own life. You have to grant yourself the permission that you have been desperately seeking from the world. Waiting for validation is a tragic waste of your life force. When you tie your actions to the approval of others, you surrender your autonomy. You negotiate your dreams down to a size that makes other people comfortable. The result is a watered-down, compromised existence that satisfies no one, least of all yourself. You become a shadow conforming to the shape of other people's expectations. Taking responsibility means standing firmly in your own truth, regardless of the applause or the criticism. You must become the first person in your bloodline to break the old patterns, the first to demand more from yourself, the first to refuse the comfort of the spectator's seat. It is a heavy burden, but it is the only weight worth carrying. But this journey requires a different perspective on stumbling. And slowly, something inside you starts to return. You begin to understand that the spectator's greatest fear is a phantom. They are paralyzed by the concept of failure. They view a setback as a permanent stain on their character, a definitive proof of their inadequacy, because they attach their self-worth to immediate, flawless execution. They never execute at all. They prefer the perfect illusion of what they could do over the messy reality of what they actually attempt. This perfectionism is a disease that kills momentum. It keeps you chained to the starting line, endlessly preparing, perpetually planning, and never shipping. By refusing to fail, you refuse to learn. You deny yourself the critical data that only comes from contact with reality. Your life becomes a sterile environment where nothing goes wrong, but absolutely nothing of substance ever grows. The pioneer redefines failure entirely. It is not a verdict on your value, it is simply a mechanism of discovery. You are an explorer mapping new terrain. Every mistake is a data point, revealing a route that does not work, which brings you one step closer to the route that does. You must detach your ego from the outcome and attach it strictly to the effort. This is how you build resilience. The architecture of self-reliance is built on order, not motivation. Motivation is an emotion, and like all emotions, it is unreliable and fleeting. The spectator relies on bursts of inspiration to get things done, which is why their progress is chaotic and inconsistent. They are waiting to feel like doing the work. But feeling has nothing to do with building. When you rely on inspiration, you become a slave to your own moods. You negotiate with your weaknesses every single day. The internal dialogue is exhausting, draining the very energy you need to execute. This lack of inner order manifests as physical and mental clutter. You drop commitments, break promises to yourself, and slowly erode the foundation of your own self-trust. You must replace motivation with structure. Discipline is the quiet, unyielding system that holds your life together when you do not want to perform. It is the act of deciding once and then simply executing the decision. True self-reliance comes from knowing that your actions are dictated by your principles, not your momentary feelings. You build order internally, and it naturally shapes your external reality. The next step is claiming it entirely. Taking ownership of the unknown is the final transition of this phase. You are no longer just preparing, you are stepping firmly onto the path. The spectator looks at the future and sees a threat, a series of uncontrollable events that will happen to them. The pioneer looks at the future and sees raw material. They understand that the unknown is not an enemy to be feared, but a resource to be shaped. If you do not take ownership, the world will happily assign you a place, and the place the world assigns is never at the top. You will be utilized to build someone else's vision, caught in the current of other people's momentum. You will live a reactive life, constantly putting out fires instead of intentionally building the structure you actually want to inhabit. You must aggressively claim your trajectory. This means accepting full responsibility for every outcome, good or bad. There is profound power in saying, "I am the reason I am here, and I will be the reason I get out." When you stop blaming the environment, the economy, or the circumstances, you suddenly realize you hold all the leverage, you are in control, and once you have this control, the real work begins. The transition into true power is rarely accompanied by applause. It is a profound, quiet shift from endless contemplation into deliberate action. You stop talking about what you're going to do, and you simply begin doing it. The pioneer understands that motion is the only metric that matters. Every step taken, no matter how small, physically alters the landscape of your reality. The anxiety of endless planning completely dissolves the moment your hands finally touch the work. The spectator, conversely, is obsessed with the illusion of movement. They mistake talking, planning, and organizing for actual execution. This keeps them trapped in a cycle of high friction and zero output. They expend all their energy announcing their intentions to the world, leaving nothing in the tank for the grueling, solitary process of building. They want the identity of a creator without ever enduring the sacrifice of creation. You must protect your energy through absolute discretion. Stop announcing your next move. Let your work speak with a heavy, undeniable presence. When action becomes your baseline, you no longer need to convince yourself or anyone else of your worth. The results stand on their own. The quiet power of action becomes your loudest statement. This foundation of action naturally demands a new internal architecture. True power is not found in dominating your external environment, but in establishing unshakable inner order. The pioneer recognizes that the mind is a chaotic terrain. If left unmanaged, it will naturally drift toward fear, distraction, and the path of least resistance. You must become the strict governor of your own attention, organizing your internal state so that it serves your highest objectives rather than sabotaging them. Without this internal order, you are constantly reacting to the noise of the world. A single negative comment, an unexpected delay, or a momentary failure can completely derail your entire day. This emotional fragility is the hallmark of the spectator. They are leaves blown by the wind, entirely dependent on favorable weather. They suffer deeply because their internal state is entirely controlled by external, unpredictable forces. Building inner order means deciding in advance how you will respond to adversity. It is the practice of creating a space between a trigger and your reaction. In that quiet space lies your freedom. When your mind is structured, external chaos loses its grip on you. You observe the storm without letting it inside the fortress. This mental clarity is what allows you to sustain long-term effort without burning out. And this clarity changes your role in society. The ultimate manifestation of this inner order is a permanent shift in your identity. You move from being a consumer of the world to a creator within it. The spectator exists merely to digest what others have built. They consume entertainment, opinions, and products, believing that gathering more inputs will eventually fill the void inside them. But consumption is a bottomless pit that never leads to genuine satisfaction. This endless loop of consumption is a highly effective anesthetic. It numbs the pain of stagnation. As long as you are watching someone else's journey on a screen, you do not have to face the terrifying reality of your own unwritten story. You trade the difficult, rewarding process of making something valuable for the cheap, fleeting dopamine of passive observation. You become a ghost, leaving no tangible mark on the world to break this. You must radically tilt the ratio of output to input. For every hour you spend consuming, you must spend 2 hours producing. The deep, lasting fulfillment you seek can only be found in the act of creation. Whether you are building a business, writing a piece of code, or shaping your own physical strength, the act of bringing order to chaos is the highest expression of human potential. This continuous creation builds an unstoppable force. As you consistently choose creation over consumption, you begin to generate the momentum of the pioneer. Momentum is not created by one massive heroic victory. It is the quiet accumulation of 1,000 unbroken promises to yourself. It is waking up and executing the plan on the days when your body is tired and your mind is heavy. This consistency compounds, transforming slight daily edges into an insurmountable advantage. The spectator deeply misunderstands this momentum. When they see someone operating with high velocity, they immediately attribute it to luck, talent, or unfair circumstances. This is another lie they tell themselves to justify their own inertia. They refuse to acknowledge the years of silent, invisible labor that built the machine. By calling it luck, they excuse themselves from the grueling process of putting in the reps. You must understand that momentum is ruthlessly earned and fiercely protected. Once you have it, the work does not necessarily become easier, but you become fundamentally stronger. The resistance that once paralyzed you now feels like a warm-up. You learn to ride the wave of your own compounding effort, trusting the strict systems you have built. The pioneer becomes a force of nature, and this force culminates in your final responsibility. Your final responsibility is to recognize that your life is not a series of random events happening to you. It is a raw block of marble waiting for your chisel. The logic you choose to act or to wait, to pioneer or to spectate, is the tool you use to carve it. You hold the absolute power to shape your reality, but only if you stop handing the chisel to fear, comfort, and the fleeting opinions of the crowd. The most tragic fate is to reach the end of your timeline and realize you spent it entirely in the audience. To look back and see a life defined by avoidance, by the things you were too afraid to try, and by the greatness you willingly delegated to others. The pain of discipline is temporary, but the agonizing regret of an unlived life echoes permanently. The spectator dies without ever knowing what they could have become. You must take the chisel, strike the stone with deliberate, unapologetic force. Embrace the heavy, glorious burden of being the one who steps into the dark first. The world does not need more critics or passive observers. It desperately needs individuals who are willing to forge their own masterpiece out of the chaos of existence. The choice is entirely yours, and you make it every single morning. The invisible framework that has governed your choices is now exposed in the light. The paralyzing logic of the spectator, the quiet surrender to comfort, and the externalization of your own potential can no longer operate in the shadows of your mind. You now see the precise mechanism that keeps men bound to mediocrity. But awareness without execution is just another form of entertainment. You are now tasked with the heavy, beautiful work of dismantling your old patterns. Stop waiting for the perfect moment or the absence of fear. Stop looking at the achievements of others as an excuse to rest and begin using them as a map for your own ascent. The path of the pioneer is steep, solitary, and unforgiving, but it is the only terrain where true strength is forged. You must reclaim the energy you have wasted on hesitation and channel it entirely into forward motion. Your life is waiting for you to take command. Build your inner order, embrace the friction of the unknown, and refuse to die a consumer in a world you were meant to shape. If this message brought clarity to your mind, subscribe to the channel and join those who are quietly doing the work. The era of watching from the sidelines is over.